Hey, Clayton, in Genesis 18, why did God need to go down to see if Sodom was as bad as the outcry said? Doesn't God already know everything? Okay, let me read the verse that this person is referring to, okay? In Genesis 18, it's the story of God visiting Abraham, and he comes kind of in kind of a human form. It's these three men show up, and one of them is the Lord, and it seems like the other two are angels or something like that. And so it says, after he visits Abraham, it says, "Then the Lord said, 'The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know.'" Okay, so this is strange because we say, God knows everything. Why would he have to physically go and visit this town to say, oh, is it really as bad as all the people are telling me? Doesn't he already know all of those things? Okay, I want to teach you two fancy theological ideas, and you can use these to impress your friend, or maybe not. Okay, the two words are this: anthropomorphism and accommodation. These are two very important concepts. Anthropomorphism is just a long word that means when Scripture depicts God doing something the way a human would do it so that we can understand it. Okay, so there are all sorts of places where in the Bible, God is described as doing very human-like things, okay? It talks about God's eyes being on us, or God's hand reaching out to us, or his strong arm. There's in Genesis chapter 2, it talks about God breathing the breath of life into people. And we know God is a spirit, so he doesn't physically have eyes. He doesn't have physical hands. He doesn't breathe with lungs. He doesn't do these sorts of things. Or sometimes it's even things like talking about God remembering people. Well, God doesn't forget. He has all knowledge, so he doesn't have to kind of call back to mind somebody. But these are ways of depicting God's action in a way that's similar to a human's so that we can understand and get our heads around what he's doing. That's anthropomorphism. The other idea is accommodation. Accommodation is the idea that God interacts with people in a way that meets people where they are. It's a way that he says, I'm going to draw near to you and almost create an interface between me and you so that you can relate to me, so that you can understand me, so that we can communicate, because I'm so far beyond you that I have to accommodate myself. You would never be able to get your head around me. You'd never be able to approach me unless I changed the way we interact so it was kind of at your level. So, for example, even the Bible itself is accommodation because it uses human language to communicate to us. Prayer is accommodation. God does not need us to inform him about the situations in our lives, but in order for us to relate to him, he says, I want you to tell me what's going on. Even places in the Bible where God adapts to the kind of cultural context of his people and says, I'm going to give you laws that relate to your agriculture or the economics of the time or the different cultural things that are going on here. The ultimate example of accommodation, of course, is Jesus, right? God shows up actually as a human so that we can interact with him face to face, touch him, interact, hear, talk with him, right? So anthropomorphism and accommodation, very important concepts when you're reading the Bible, because you are going to encounter things that you say, God doesn't need to do that. And you say, why? Sometimes it's because God is being depicted like a human so we can understand what he's doing. And sometimes he's accommodating to us to meet us where we're at so that we can actually kind of interface with him in a suitable way for us. So in this story, why does God go down to a place to see if what they have done is really bad? Okay, shouldn't he already know that? This is in some ways anthropomorphism. It's describing God's actions as if they were human actions, even though he acts in ways that are different from humans. It's also accommodation because God is showing up and meeting us where we are so that we can understand and relate to him. Let me show you about this, okay? The whole passage uses judge language in it. Abraham refers to God as the righteous judge, the judge of all the earth. And so there's this idea that God is acting the way a human judge would. Okay. What this does is God shows up to look around and almost take in the evidence and say, build the case. You know, it's of course he knows it, but what he's doing is he's showing up and acting like a judge in front of people. And what this does is it provides, first of all, Abraham an opportunity to intercede for Sodom. Okay, so this is accommodation, right? This is Abraham now getting to say to God, hey, can I pray on behalf of this city that looks so wicked that perhaps you might spare it? So there's a chance for Abraham to interact with God in a way that otherwise he wouldn't be able to. There's also an opportunity for Lot, who's living in Sodom, to be warned so he can get his family out. Again, accommodation. God shows up in a way that says, okay, I'm going to interact with you here. it also acts as sort of a public test of what God already knows to be true, okay? So this happens from time to time in the Bible where God tests people. Not that God doesn't know what's inside of people, but he wants to kind of bring out into the open what's already on the inside. So you think about God testing Abraham by saying, would you be willing to sacrifice your son? It's not because God didn't know what Abraham was made out of, but he needed to bring it out and say, and now I see not just your heart's intention, but your actual follow through. Your character is revealed publicly because of this test. And to think about this, you can almost think about it as kind of a court trial, okay? The judge is sort of holding a trial and seeing the evidence here. And what trials do in society are twofold, okay? Trials, one of the things they do is they ensure that there is due process. Okay? We are finite, fallible creatures, and if we don't go through a process of saying, show us the evidence, give us the witnesses, help us to see the evidence for and against, that helps us avoid condemning the innocent or pardoning the guilty, okay? So we need a process that helps finite people get that done. Now, this is not true for God. He doesn't need a process to know what's true. He can just make the declaration. But the other thing that trials do is trials make public things that were previously hidden. It brings into light and say, let me show you all the evidence is here, so that when the judge makes his verdict, everybody in the room knows this is based off of facts. This is based off of true things. It shows that the judge is making a just decision, a right ruling. It is a way of saying, we see, Judge, that you were right in making that call, and we cannot question it because we have seen the evidence before our own eyes. The community can stand up and affirm and say, yes, you are right. I think that's part of what's going on here. God is showing up in a way that proves definitively this city deserves to be condemned. And so he doesn't need to do it for himself, but he does need to do it for us. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.